On this edition of Jets FM on the Our Lads Football Network, Randy Lange, senior consultant and reporter for NewYorkJets.com, will help preview the Jets game in Jacksonville on Sunday and take a look at the latest roster moves from the past week, media reaction, injury updates, and more as Jets FM Fridays on the Our Lads Football Network starts now. It's Friday, September 28th, 2018. I'm Greg DePalma. This is Jets FM Fridays on the Our Lads Football Radio Network at ourlads.com. Jets FM is brought to you by ourlads.com, providing the best New York Jets depth charts in the industry. Athlon Sports, the leading publisher of preseason annuals for more than 50 years and sold in 60,000 outlets nationwide. And also, don't forget the best weekly Jets news available at NewYorkJets.com. With Randy Lange's 7 points game previews available on Fridays, his Inside the Numbers articles available on Saturdays, and comprehensive postgame coverage from the top NewYorkJets.com staff following every game all season long. You can also follow Randy on Twitter at @RLangeJets. You can follow us here on Twitter at PrimeSN, and that's one of the top 2 places for you to be able to send messages. Or, of course, if you have any questions for the show, you can send it on Twitter, PrimeSN, or you could also email us, Jets, Jets, Jets at primesportsnetwork.com. And by the way, it's just Jets, Jets. I mean, just Jets. Don't say Jets after Jets. All right, enough. All right, so Randy, this is what happens when you have 10 days to worry about the next game. We get a little crazy here, but we are just a few days away finally from the next Jets game. And, not a whole lot happening this week, and maybe that's a good thing. No drama from the past week. Hopefully they're getting ready and they're feeling good about coming back strong and taking on a Jacksonville team that – unfortunately, it's coming off a loss. I feel like this is deja vu all over again, like the Browns game. It's like, you don't necessarily want to play teams sometimes when they come off losses, especially teams like the Jags, sloppy game. They're going to be determined to make sure it doesn't happen again. They get Fournette back, and goody for us. We get to go play them this week.
Yeah, all that's true, Greg, but I think the key thing for the Jets has been their mantra this week, which is we're moving on. They had the great opener against Detroit, then they suffered 2 tough losses to Miami at home, and then last Thursday night to Cleveland. But they got the long weekend, the 10-day break instead of the 3-day break. And the sayings in the locker room this week were, we're not looking back, we're looking ahead. It's the best way to do it, and they need to focus on Jacksonville because, as you mentioned, the Jaguars are in a dangerous spot for the Jets. I mean, they're coming off of a tough loss at home to Tennessee. They do want to atone. They're getting Fournette back. They've got one of the best secondaries in the game going up against Sam Darnold, who is still a rookie, no matter how well he plays or how much he scuffles as he did against Cleveland. He's going to have a tough job ahead of him. So, they're concentrated on what is ahead for them, as opposed to lamenting the lost opportunities the last 2 weeks, and that's the best way to approach it in the NFL.
Yeah, well, we'll see on Sunday. I think what they have to do more importantly, especially, with Blake Bortles, you're going to have a chance to beat Jacksonville if Bortles is having one of his bad weeks like he had last week, and normally – What'll happen with Bortles is if he gets off to a slow start, he ain't recovering. That's the game he's going to have. Sure, he may make a throw or two, and they still might win a game. But Blake Bortles can go from a Patriot performance to the Tennessee performance on a dime, and a lot of that depends on confidence, especially, and what kind of start he gets off to. So very important for the Jets to get off to a good start, rattle Bortles as best they can. And hopefully he's also off a little bit early on, and that'll give the Jets a shot. And then they have to try to close because the Detroit game was not a close effort. I mean, they blew out Detroit. It's been the last 2 losses. It was something that was a problem last year. So far, there have been 2 close games, 2 games decided by 1 score, and the Jets have lost both of them.
Yeah, that's true, and that was one of the points of emphasis for Todd Bowles in the preseason and on into the regular season. Besides we want to finish, besides wanting to start better, which they did it certainly against Detroit and certainly did against Cleveland, but they want to finish better, and that's something that has been ongoing. They need to correct that. They need to be able to come back to overcome adversity. You mentioned Bortles, very good point. The Jets, maybe to the surprise of some, have developed a pass rush over the last 2 weeks, even though they lost those games. 8 sacks in 2 games, something they haven't done, 4 sacks in back-to-back games since 2015. And yet, what does that all mean? You have to do it every week, and that pass rush can disappear almost as quickly as your takeaway knack, which disappeared for the Jets against the Browns. So they need to apply pressure to Bortles, I think. They need to stop the run first and foremost, and that means, meeting Fournette head up and, stoning him at the line more often than not, and then they can maybe tee off on Bortles and cough up a few of those, interceptions that he's been known to throw. And the Jets have done well against Bortles in the past. Doesn't mean anything necessarily for this year, but they're 2-0 against him with wins in 2015 and last year, both at home. Now they get to take him up on the road in Jacksonville.
All right. Well, another part of the Jets' game plan that must be a factor is special teams. And all of a sudden, not only has this not been an issue for the Jets this season, all you got to do is take a look at some of those preseason articles that the Jets media were throwing out there after they didn't look so good in the preseason, which, of course, we tried to warn everybody. It's just the preseason. It's not the same bodies of work, and you're testing things out, and you're trying to perfect your overall unit. And we knew the Jets came into this season after the money they spent. One of the things that I thought McCagnon and the staff did a really good job of, Randy, was going out there and getting players that, not household names, Kevin Pierre-Louis is one of them, Hewitt's another, not household names, but players that are definitely going to help them in an important part of any team, and that's special teams. And your most recent article, Inside the Numbers, actually that's coming out tomorrow, you wrote about the Jets special teams and how not only is it performing well, but it might be one of the best in the NFL after the first 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's kind of a shock to a lot of people too. And again, special teams ratings or rankings are very scattershot. Some outlets do put out a ranking, and I did my own ranking of the readily available numbers and rankings that that Elias puts out on special teams. We come up with about 10 rankings there, and the Jets are number 2 in the league. They're behind only Kansas City, and that goes without saying with Tyreek Hill and the great special teams they're playing. But the Jets are up there, and can that suffer? Of course it can. But the message that Brant Boyer, the coordinator, put out to reporters yesterday when he was taking a bit of a bow for the very good start, is that he feels that the Jets were very aware, as you mentioned, of bringing in and keeping very good core special teams players this year, and in doing so, they have improved the odds of the unit, making that big difference in field position, which is one of those hidden yardage things, but is so important. To me, it's almost as important, if not more important, than the takeaway, turnover takeaway margin.
Well, especially when you have a rookie quarterback.
Especially with a rookie quarterback. And, if you're facing, teams that the last 2 weeks, the Jets have faced hot punters, which is one of the reasons that, one of the contributing factors to the losses was Matt Hawk with the Dolphins and then the Browns last week. They were pinning the Jets. Unfortunately, the one play in the Jets' favor was Kevin Pierre-Louis's block of the punt in the late first quarter that set up the first touchdown. So that's a good sign. But you can't. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, and if they're going to pin you inside your 10, your 20, you've got to do the same to them. That has been the one thing I think that the Jets still want to see improvement on with Lachlan Edwards. He's having another very good year. He's improving his averages, which were franchise records last year in both gross and net, but he still has that 1 or 2 punts per game that you say, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Not a high hang time, down the middle of the field. He knows he's got to remove them. He's been aware of that, and I know Brant Boyer's letting him know about it. But I think all of those signs, including Lachlan Edwards and the punt cover guys, all are pointing to a very good dimension for this team. And coming up against the Jaguars, their punting game is 31st in the league in gross, and I think 28th in net. This is a very good opportunity for Andre Roberts and the Jets to get some of that good field position that could lead to a victory.
Yeah, Edwards was third overall in the NFL last year in inside the 20 punts, 33 of 94, after being 17th in 2016. So, yeah, he improved across the board last year. But like you said, in order for him to become one of the top punters in the league, and he still has that in him, he has to get rid of that one bad punt every game. And once he's a lot more consistent in that department, then he will be one of the top punters in the league. And then you throw in Myers, and so far Myers has been perfect because he's knocked in all of his field goals. And look, we still don't know. It's a long season. What happens when he misses his first field goal, especially if it happens to be an important one? How does that affect him psychologically? Hopefully it won't. We talked about in the beginning of the season that give Myers a chance. You never know when the light is going to turn on, and he's going to all of a sudden become a real big weapon, not only because of his kickoff ability and his deep range ability in field goals, but his consistency too. But that is really the big part of the special teams, is having Myers, whenever you need him, 90% of the time it's a touchback.
Yeah, it's pretty close to 90%. I think it's 88%, which is 15 out of 17. The only kick that he did not put in the Browns' end zone last Thursday night was the one that he had to kick off from his 20 because of Isaiah Crowell's untimely display after his second touchdown.
Yeah.
But that being said, again, as Brant Boyer said yesterday, all things considered, he would rather probably take the ball at the 25 with no return because of the great talents of a lot of players in the league who are back there, ready to field that short kickoff. He'd rather take the ball at the 25 and get the offense off and running without having to give up a possible long return. Obviously, the Jets could cover and trap him inside the 20. They haven't done that this year because they haven't had to. So we'll see. That could be a big factor, especially because Myers is going back to the place that he called his home for 2.5 years, 2 years and 6 games with the Jaguars. He said it'll be fun. He loves it down there. He expects maybe some of that bad First Coast Florida weather, with a little thunderstorm mixed in with everything else going on, and the high heat and humidity perhaps. But he's ready to pound him again, and he can be another weapon in that field position battle for the Jets. Yeah,
matter of fact, I think Lambeau's dealing with an injury for the Jags, their kicker, so that could be important in a close game. Is the Jags situation on special teams with both kickers, even and again, you mentioned how poorly they've done this year overall, where the Jets have done well, and especially if Myers has to line up for a game-winning field goal against his former team on his former field. So I think the Jets would take that. 9 out of 10 times, I think the Jets take that. Let's see if we can actually get in that spot, though. As far as transactions over the past week, 8 days since the last show, not a whole lot going on. The big news, though, the big transaction was the Ardarius Stewart, seeing him gone for the year, and Burnett moved back onto the practice squad. So that means Hansen and Stewart, wash. Hansen gone. Stewart, not sure exactly what's going to happen to him in his career. I'm going to say this again. I said this all preseason. I just think that as long as Stewart is ready to go in the preseason next year and he's battling for a roster spot, Roberts is a good returner. We know that, but he's also up there in age. I think he's around 30 or something. Yeah. I think they got to. I think they should, with the depth the Jets have right now at receiver. I think they got to try to see if they can make a returner out of Stewart.
Well, that certainly was a thought last year. He did return some kickoffs. Punts, we don't know. We also know that the Jets drafted Trenton Cannon, who, got a tryout. And got a look-see in the preseason at both kick and punt. He was a little nervous there, put the ball on the ground a few times, as we know. He's still on the roster. He's contributed certainly in Detroit a little bit as a backup running back. But right now, that's where we're seeing him, as well as seeing Cannon, which I noticed a few times, not the whole game, but on several punts, he was one of the gunners. So Brant Boyer mixing up his gunners a little bit just to get maybe a change of pace, and
he's fast
with the with the opponents, trying to keep those guys at bay. And so you got Sharon Peake, you got Trenton Cannon, you got Roberts, Darryl Roberts, of course, and so that's also working well as far as covering punts. And that's another element of something that could be very important in this game against the Jaguars.
So, Stuart, any idea whether or not the reason he's out is going to affect him moving on?
Haven't heard anything specific on the injury, that he was placed on practice squad IR.
Okay.
But, he was cut, and so then a lot of people said, well, the Jets have given up on Ardarius. No, they didn't. That's the procedure. You got to be you got to wait a few days before you can determine whether a team is giving up on a guy,
sure,
especially a young player.
Yep.
But they did bring him back to the practice squad, and then they placed him on IR. And Deontay Burnett, as you mentioned, is back. So it'll be another year season and off season of learning and watching and rehabbing and getting ready for the next season. It sometimes works out and sometimes doesn't. So it's up to Ardarius at this point. Meanwhile, the Jets seem to have the people in place, both on special teams and at wide receiver,
sure,
at the back end of the wide receiver core to handle that departure. There are going to be more, as we know, a game of attrition sometimes. Hopefully the Jets can maintain health, which they've done fairly well so far this year. And, that will not be a factor going down the stretch as it has been in the past.
Yeah, I look at the Jets right now, by the way, and I think it's obvious. Once again, I think especially next year, it's going to be about upgrading the offensive line, and especially the depth, and also taking a look and finding out, can you get a number one receiver out there? Is there someone with a big-time talent that you can acquire either through a trade or free agency or early in the draft? And then the obvious one, of course, is pass rusher. But it's good to know after a few years, the Jets really don't have as many holes as some people might believe. I think that's it. I think it's pass rusher, depth along the offensive line, and see if you can get a number one wide receiver.
Yeah, looking ahead, obviously we have 13 games to go this season, but it's a fan favorite to look way down the road. And even Christopher Johnson, the owner now of the Jets, made a reference to it in his most recent meeting with reporters last week, and said, we have a lot of room under the cap next year. So the Jets have been rumored. I can't verify it, but obviously you've seen the stories that the Jets inquired about Le'Veon Bell, and they inquired about Khalil Mack before he was traded from Oakland to Chicago. And so what does that mean? I don't know that the Jets were doing that. I can't confirm that, or if they were, I can't confirm how close they were. But it's interesting that the word is out there that they're still looking to improve the team even this year, but they will have the room next year to do, to make that addition, whatever it might be, whether they feel it's that running back or that number one receiver or that pass rusher, which, obviously Jet fans would like to see that. If they can somehow piece together this rush this year with a very good back four and an improving front seven, then we'll hang in there until next year. But even the fact that the rumors are out there that the Jets are still looking to improve this season is a good sign, I think, just because the Jets aren't going to give away the store. But they're still looking because they have high hopes, whether it be for this year, next year, but in the long term, they're looking, to improve the team at all times.
Yeah, and look, I don't think there's any question that within the next year or two, they definitely will also be looking for that number one running back. And I think just right now it would be a luxury for them. I don't think it's what they need to turn the corner necessarily above some of the other things that I've mentioned, especially the offensive line. And look, they know it's 2 or 3 years down the road when Sam Darnold becomes a true starter in every sense of the word. That's when it won't be about thinking of the future anymore. It'll be about expectations. It'll be about playoffs. It'll be nothing short of Super Bowl before a big difference for the focus of what it's all about right now. And as far as Le'Veon Bell, I mean, it's a very interesting idea, and it's not one I think that Jet fans would be upset about. It's just like anything, and I don't think the Jets would have to give up the farm like Khalil Mack, anything close to it. It's just that, do they even want to give up some sort of a mid-round pick, third round, second round, or a third round and a player? Do they want to give that up? And I wonder if they give up a third rounder and a player, I wonder if that player has to be a running back. It quite could be. And do they want to do that right now when they see themselves at this point in their rebuild and they say, well, hey, things are going pretty well with Crowell and Powell. Is this a position, is that the spot we really need to be concentrating on right now and giving up more picks for, when we can just hold on to those picks and hold on to that player and wait till next year? And if we want, we could just sign Le'Veon Bell for free. And even at that point, that's something that they have to think about, because it's going to cost a lot of money. And even though they have $100 million in cap space next year, you still have to wonder whether or not that's something the Jets need to do, as opposed to some of the other positions that they'll need to fill and spend money on.
Yeah, those are great points, Greg. And, as we've said, I think it's encouraging. It's interesting that the Jets may have inquired. Again, I can't confirm it. That they were out there, pounding the phones and, trying to get a deal done. But they were inquiring, perhaps. And if they were, then that's a good thing, because they obviously were not going to make a deal at all costs. And the reason is, as you mentioned, I think for this year, Bilal Powell and Isaiah Crowell are a good 1-2 punch. You can say what you want about either player. Bilal's a little older now. Obviously, he's a senior Jet as far as 8 years of service. Crowell, some people love him, some people not so much, but he showed that he still has giddy up in the tank with a 62-yard touchdown run against Detroit and 2 touchdowns against the Browns. And both players seem to be okay with this timeshare and, being as fresh as possible and pounding away at opponents and playing off of each other. And so I think that the need this season is probably not there. I think the Jets can do well with that tandem, and we're going to find out a lot more. Every game provides more input, and it's going to be a big, I believe, a really important part of the game at Jacksonville if the Jets can run the ball on the Jaguars. That's the one soft spot in the Jaguars' defensive armor so far. They're 21st in the league in yards allowed rush. I think they're third in pass yards allowed. So, you want to give Sam Darnold the best chance.
Sure.
You're going to be handing that ball off to Isaiah and to Bilal and trying to get those gashes that they got against the Browns, at least in the middle quarters, and set Darnold up for a little play action and try to get a receiver open against that formidable secondary.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Bates does this week as far as game planning. He's got the extra days to prepare. And there were, of course, the pass, the quick pass to Quincy Enunwa, and let him make some moves and pick up the first down. That worked. It was 3 for 3, but the Jags will be waiting for that. So sure, you can try it once, and if the Jags shut it down, then you move on. And that's going to be up to Bates and this team. They got to figure out other ways of helping Sam Darnold out, just like the defense has to figure out ways, as we said last week, to help Leonard Williams out. Leonard Williams also, we need him to start making plays in the backfield. And I think in order to do that, he's got to be moved around. You got to do something that the Jags have not seen on film yet, both for Leonard Williams and for Sam Darnold in the offense. And I will say that one play that needs to get scrapped out of the Jets' offensive playbook is, and we saw it again early against the Browns last week, was the same kind of Sam Darnold's going to go one way and turn around and throw the ball the opposite end of the field. When I saw that again, I was like, why are you doing this again? I mean, didn't you learn your lesson the first time? So scrap that play. Don't ever run that play again this year until Sam Darnold is a little older. And maybe there's a little bit more going on where opposing defenses aren't jamming us at the line of scrimmage because they're forcing us to beat them in other ways. So that's the kind of thing that we have to do, and it'll be interesting to see what Bates has up his sleeve.
Yes, it will be. What I'd like to see is with Quincy, as you mentioned, having very good success, 4 catches, 4 first downs, 3 on third downs, moving the chains, lots of yards after the catch. Quincy now 8 yards after every catch on average this season. He's among the league leaders at wide receiver, and he is a factor. But let's see the Jets play off of that this week because, as you say, the Jaguars are going to be waiting for it. Let's have a play fake. Let's have a pump fake to that side, and we go to Jermaine Kearse down the right side, or something like that. I'm sure that Jeremy Bates has thought of all these things, and we're going to see them come out on Sunday. But that's the kind of thing that you see in an evolving quarterback, rookie quarterback, and in a coordinator who is not a rookie coordinator in Bates, but is certainly somebody who's been out of that loop for a while, and now he's back in it, and he's getting his feet back under him again. And so I would hope and expect to see not only Darnold improving, but also Jeremy Bates' play calling and managing that offense improving as we go along, because as we've noted, there still is interesting talent, maybe not your number one, wide receiver, the acknowledged, top 5 guy in the NFL. He's not there.
That's a luxury.
There's a very interesting mix of wide receivers.
Yes.
The tight ends could present something for you to work with down the seam. The running backs, certainly, are working well as a tandem. So, let's see that mix. Let's see that masterly mix, and maybe the Jets can throw the Jaguars for a little bit of a loop on defense and get a few touchdowns on the board. That's very hard to come by against that Jaguars defense.
Yeah, just to tell you the ignorance of some of the media on ESPN when they were talking about the Le'Veon Bell trade, a few guys talked about how Bell would obviously instantly be the Jets' best rusher, but then they also said, and best receiver. I mean, they just don't. You got a guy like Quincy Enunwa, and they don't have that star power. They haven't done it over 5 or 10 years, but that's why you have to educate yourself. If you're a football analyst and this is what you do, you should be educating yourself enough to know how good Quincy Enunwa is, and not to degrade him in any way by saying that a running back would be a better receiver than he is on the team as soon as he got there. But I think a Le'Veon Bell, what he does, or a receiver or a tight end, whenever the Jets get that player, whether it's this year or next year, that game breaker. See, Enunwa fits a good role, and I think the comparison to Anquan Bolden is perfect, because Bolden was always a very physical, big receiver, got you the tough yards. He could also make some big plays now and then, but I don't think. But of course, Bolden was never looked at as a Julio Jones, an Antonio Brown, or anything like that. But again, those players don't come around very often. So I'm not trying to sit here and say, oh, yeah, the Jets got to go out there in the draft or in free agency next year and got to get me one of those guys. But, if they can just get another true number one guy, somebody that would be considered a true number one, and hey, if you can have 2 number ones on the team and Nunua could be 1B or 1A even, that's fine with me. But that's the one thing that will also help Darnold out is he it is important. And as much as the media wants to crap on the Jets' skill position, fact is they were never as bad as they are leading on. But yes, is there that one missing scary player that will keep defensive coordinators up at night? Is that something that we are still looking for? Absolutely.
Yeah, they're looking for it, and they're also looking for one of those players to emerge this year, and that's Robbie Anderson. I didn't mention in my last answer, but definitely Robbie is feeling, kind of like, he hasn't been able to get loose and get free, and teams are playing him a little differently, and and he's fumbled the ball, lost 2 fumbles the last 2 games. I think he's trying a little too hard to get that yardage and make that big play. But, we do need to remember, and the Jets need to find Robbie downfield, because this is a guy who had 17 20-plus yard catches in a 10-game span last year, starting in Game 3, going through Game 12. What happened early and late? Well, things happened late with McCown going down. Early, he took a little slow start, too. This year, the same. But, at some point, Robbie Anderson needs to break free. He says it. He knows it. And that was big talk this week with the writers questioning Todd Bowles and Jeremy Bates is, what's wrong, what's happened to Robbie, and how can Sam Darnold find him? Is he not taking shots that are there down the field? So there's a lot of that angst going on this week, but it'll all go away if Darnold can find Robbie even once, like he did against Detroit, in a masterful play, probably his best throw as a pro so far.
Sure.
And getting a 41-yard touchdown out of Robbie and starting the ball rolling against the Lions. So it's there, and it's up to the Jets and to try to find a matchup issue, and if they do, then that's going to pay off big time sooner than later, I think. And it would be very nice if it paid off against the Jaguars.
Yeah, I said this last week on the postgame show that I don't know because I didn't watch the film. I don't know whether it's Sam Darnold doesn't want to take the chance, whether he's not realizing that maybe there is a possible play there, so you should throw it, or whether or not, like you said, that opposing teams are saying, hey, we know what Robbie Anderson wants to do. We're taking that away. So you're going to have to find another way to get Robbie Anderson the football, throw in Darnold's a rookie, and Bates is the new coordinator. And so there's a lot of questions there that it's not so easy to blame any one particular person or player on whether or not Robbie Anderson is getting the ball effectively. But one thing is certain, and that is Sam Darnold. I don't even recall, to tell you the truth, that Sam Darnold has thrown more than one pass all season longer than 30 or 40 yards, and that was the touchdown. I don't recall any. Now, what will happen if Sam Darnold decides after hearing all this, and the Jets hear all of it, and they force it, and he gets picked? Well, that's not good either. So you can't do that. And especially when you're trying to play with special teams and defense, turnovers matter.
It's a constant twisting and turning and chess match between, offense and defense, coordinator versus coordinator. If the defense is going to play safety over the top of Robbie and always having help against him, the Jets and Darnold have to find the guy underneath or the guy on the other side. And when they do that, then all of a sudden the defense has to commit to that play working, and Robbie Anderson all of a sudden is down the field waving for the ball. So, everybody knows that, but it's a matter of how quickly can Sam Darnold, is he such a wonderkind that he can make these leaps and bounds in one game that he'll need to combat Jacksonville and Jalen Ramsey and AJ Bouye and they're a very talented secondary. Well, we'll see. But that's been the impression that Sam has given everybody watching him from the time he was drafted through, rookie minicamp, through the OTAs, through training camp, is that he's a quick study. He doesn't make the same mistake twice. Let's see. This is a big game for him to prove it. And that doesn't mean he should go out and try to throw it, 45 times and get picked off 3 times more. Because that's not good. But, it's a big game for him to show that he's learning and that he can find the most appropriate guy when his main downfield threat is taken away from him. And it's going to be very interesting to see how that chess match plays out.
And it's good to have Curse back. He made that great catch on 4th down. He's a very valuable part of the receiving core. I know Pryor's a little bit banged up, but he should play, or at least that's what it looks like. He's been limited with some ankle issues. Speaking of injuries, most of the injuries, the key injuries, are coming from the secondary, but it does look like, at least now, because they were just limited, that Middleton, Screen, and Marcus May should be able to play, and that is going to definitely help the secondary to have another playmaker out there. And Marcus May, we talked about Doug Middleton dropping the interception in the end zone. What if that's Marcus May? So now Middleton's done a fine job, and he's a fine football player. He looks like he's going to be a very valuable backup to Marcus May and to Jamal Adams moving forward, especially more to Jamal Adams. I kind of think Middleton probably fits more of the Jamal Adams mode than he does the Marcus May mold, but he is a very valuable part of the defense, a very valuable part of special teams, and it's nice to see that he's healthy and making plays, and he's been a participant for this team. But Marcus May is definitely the more talented of the two, and it's good to see that it looks like he's going to be back on Sunday.
Yeah, that's not been committed yet. Todd Bowles is still waiting to see. But as he mentioned, the coach said that number 26 has been running for quite a while, and we even saw him running off the field at top speed for whatever reason yesterday. I don't think it was an emergency. I think he was just feeling pretty good and getting another run in before he went into the locker room. But May talked this week, which is another sign that maybe he's very close to returning to the lineup. And it would be great to see Jamal Adams and Marcus May re-teamed. They were the first rookie tandem to start 16 games, perhaps since 1960.
Wow.
In the NFL. I know it goes back to the Jets' history. They're the first. And they did so well, and yet they, of course, had upside, and Jamal seems to have taken that and run with that ball. And when he's reteamed with Marcus May, at the moment, it looks like Jamal's more of that box guy, that force the play, maybe blitz, tackle in the backfield. He's done a lot of that so far, and May has been more of a ball hawk in the back end. But when you get them together and their skills,
that's right.
Then all of a sudden, Casey Rogers, the defensive coordinator, can mix and match, and he can say, all right, this time we're going to send 26 and keep 33 back, and this time we'll play two top, and we'll play one deep, and it's just there's a lot of good options when Marcus May returns. And as you said, Middleton has played well. He's probably more of a box guy himself. He's third on the team in tackles, and that's pretty impressive considering the first two are linebackers.
Sure.
In Avery Williamson and Darren Lee. So, but the Jets seem to have a wealth of people that they filled in with at safety, and now that Marcus May's back, New Jack City will be whole once again, and we'll get to see that perhaps operate for the first time at full capacity on Sunday.
And with Screen being banged up a little with his knee, we might see a little bit more of Nickerson, and Nickerson is now starting to get more snaps. He actually has more snaps on defense than Darryl Roberts. So, and I shouldn't really be surprised about that because I actually think that's a good thing because Nickerson is, I think he's a very interesting talent and a player that will eventually take over Screen's role. Not sure when that will be, not right now, but it'll still be good to see if Nickerson is being trusted more out there. That's important because as we saw even in the Detroit game, and this is just a fact from his days at Tulane, I don't think there's many DBs in the NFL that have the hands of Nickerson, and combine that with his speed, and he could be a very big-time sleeper in that secondary. So we'll probably see a lot more of him, especially if Screen's a little bit banged up. I don't know if we're going to see much of Josh Martin, though. There's still a question whether or not he's going to return, even though he was at full practice. And when he does return, that's going to mean another player, maybe out of Ochu. Maybe he's the guy that has to sit out if Martin comes back.
Yeah, all of that is speculation right now. Todd Bowles said that even though Josh Martin and Marcus May seem to be going in lockstep as far as not practicing for the last 3 or 4 weeks because of their injuries. Martin had a concussion. But as Todd said, Martin hasn't been running around like May has, so he's going to have to get back into semblance of football shape. I mean, obviously he hasn't lost everything, but he does need to get back into the running and the playing. He's not going to put on pads until Sunday if he gets that far. But Josh Martin, even though he practiced full for the first time, very good development, very solid player at the outside linebacker position, did provide a little bit of a pass rush, could add to the rush that the Jets have gotten in the last 2 games, but we're not sure about his return yet from his concussion. So, they're going to bide their time at that spot, waiting for Josh to be fully ready to go. I don't know. Did you want to get into the Rashard Robinson thing now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, absolutely, because Rashard Robinson, who had his moments in the preseason, one more game to go, and then it looks like he'll be activated. You would think he would be activated in Week 5, and if that's the case, then I don't know. It probably is a rather simple thing, and what I mean by as far as who he would take a roster spot from, and I would just say, okay, well, I guess it's going to be Jones, but Jones doesn't play. Right. So he's inactive. So is there who would that be? Burris doesn't play. Maybe Wilcox. I mean, that's a possibility. He doesn't play a whole lot, but he gets out there. Roberts, I mean, as a DB, yes, but special teams, as you mentioned. Roberts is one of the top special teams performers for the Jets. So there's a lot of questions there that even when Robinson's ready to get in there, who sits?
Yeah, it's another one of those games that the coaches have to play. They don't necessarily like it, obviously, but it's the hand they've been dealt in the NFL. And Rashard Robinson was, Todd Bowles spoke very highly of him in the last after the last preseason game at Philadelphia. I think maybe a little surprising to some of the writers and reporters, just because we hadn't seen a lot of him, and he did not have a great first year as a Jet when he came over from San Francisco. Had a few mistakes, and they stood out on one touchdown play in particular. I remember he got beat in one-on-one coverage. But, that happens to the best of corners, too, sometimes. And yet, Todd Bowles speaking very highly of Rashard. You got to think after his 4-game suspension is up, after this Jacksonville game, what will they do? Will they bring him back for the 3-game homestand? We got Denver, Indianapolis, and Minnesota coming up 3 in a row at MetLife.
Yeah.
So, you look at the roster and you see who's not playing, as you mentioned. Jones is one option. Burris is another.
Jones is probably the logical guy that just throw him to the practice squad. But we have to also keep in mind, if the Jets like Derrick Jones, they may not want to put him on the practice squad and have somebody steal him. That's something that you have to keep in mind. That's why it'll be interesting when you take a look at guys like Darryl Roberts and J.J. Wilcox, because those guys are veteran guys that may not even be on the team next year. And how do they value Robinson and Jones, younger players, compared to veteran players at this time in their rebuild? Do they take the chance and expose a guy like Derrick Jones to the practice squad, or do we see a veteran cut?
Yeah, and the one other thing I would say regarding the jigsaw puzzle on the defensive side of the ball to adding a player is that you might say, well, let's look at linebacker or defensive line, but I don't think there's the fat is in those positions.
Nope.
The Jets kept a lot of DBs compared to LBs and D linemen, so I would tend to think it would be a corner, with Rashard coming in as a corner, that will have to. Go through the waiver process, or if he's a vested veteran, obviously would become a free agent. But that's an interesting topic and one for next week. Rashard will not be back this week, and but the Jets seem to obviously favor having that full complement of DBs to go up against the quarterbacks that they're going to be facing the rest of the year.
Yeah, and if it is a young corner, it could be a competition between Justin Burris and Derrick Jones. That could be who they feel has come along a little bit more, because we just haven't seen either of them play. So as far as this season, only they know. But like you said, we'll figure that out next week. All right, so that as far as injuries, that wraps through that, and of course some of the roster moves. We'll see how things go on Sunday. It's definitely a game that, when you lose a game that you kind of feel you should have won, the best thing you can do right away is win a game that people think you should lose. And if you can do that, and all of a sudden it shows you the difference in what a 2-2 record can be as opposed to a 1-3 record, especially if you go 2-2 with 3 straight home games, completely changes the perspective of the entire season. If you do that, that's how big this game is, even though most people don't expect the Jets, of course, to win it based on who they're playing.
No, absolutely. That's the best way for the Jets to look at it, is the opportunity presented, not the opportunities lost. And, if you go in 2-2 to a 3-game homestand, and you certainly, would think, Minnesota might be a little tougher, although they're on a 2-game skid right now, but they still have a pretty potent offense, and they have certainly the quarterback that the Jets pursued at one point in the preseason or the off season before they drafted Sam Darnold. But it's the Jets seem to be maybe they're having those growing pains that a growing team has, which is you play lights out against Detroit. That wasn't expected. You come home, don't play so well against Miami. That probably was not expected. And then you go to Cleveland, and with Cleveland and all the things that were going on there, you'd hope to get out of Cleveland again. I think that would have been their 6th win in a row over the Browns, but they didn't get it. But so let's turn that on its head again, and let's see what we can do against the Jaguars and get another unexpected outcome. In this case, a win on the road to take into that home stretch.
All right, Randy. Appreciate it as always. Enjoy the game on Sunday. And we'll be checking back with you next Friday when we get ready to start that 3-game homestand with the Denver Broncos.
Looking forward to it, Greg. Thanks.
Likewise. Thanks, Randy. All right, that's Randy Lange. And again, you can follow Randy at RLANGE Jets, R-Lang Jets. That's his Twitter handle. You can also follow us at Prime SN. You could send an email to us at jets@primesportsnetwork.com. And what else? Post-game show. I don't want to forget about the post-game show. Now, I have to find out sometime, maybe today, if Jan's going to join me. All of a sudden, Jan may not be able to join me again. So I might be on my own on Sunday. I might not. All depends. We're going to air the post-game show sometime between 4 and 5. And I only say that because it all depends on Jan's Jewish responsibilities. And see, I said responsibilities this time. On the other show, I said holiday. And I got to ask Jan because I don't know what it is. I mean, it should be a term for it. Jewish holiday, Jewish responsibilities, Jewish something. There's a term there. I don't know what it is. But Jan may not be able to make it on Sunday either way, depending on how late he's able to interact. So either way, I'll be on sometime between 4 and 5. If it's just me, for sure, it's 5 o'clock. If it's me and Jan, it's sometime between 4 and 5. Let's just put it that way. But either way, follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. We'll let you know when it's available on demand. And then we'll talk to you again next Friday with Randy Lange. Also, don't forget our OFN programming all next week. Here on the Our Football Radio Network. You know the drill. Alpha, Mike, Foxtrot.